Bad Bunny is going to become the biggest artist in the world. At every single step of the journey, he's never lost that connection to his people, to the place that he's from. Saquon Barkley had the greatest revenge season in NFL history. The juiciest part of the documentary was him facing challenges with loyalty, betrayal, and understanding his own value. Call of Duty's reign of dominance might be coming to an end. Welcome back to Behold Pop Culture, the show where we take a look at all the biggest moments in culture from this past week and make sure that you're never missing out on the top conversations. This week, the pot was stirred in the music world, as many people questioned the decision that the NFL made for Bad Bunny to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show. If you perform at the Super Bowl halftime show, you're initiated into pop culture history, as only the biggest of artists get that honor, as it is the single event that gets the most eyes every single year, outside of the World Cup. But while Bad Bunny isn't the first Latin artist to headline the Super Bowl, he will likely be the first to perform most, if not all, of the songs in Spanish, which is causing some friction because not everyone speaks Spanish, let alone knows Bad Bunny songs. But I believe that not only is Bad Bunny big enough now to warrant performing at the Super Bowl, I believe that after this Super Bowl performance, Bad Bunny is going to become the biggest artist in the world. My faith in that happening comes from the fact that Bad Bunny is one of the most multi-talented artists in the Latin world and has advanced the reggaeton sound so far forward by approaching it from the same lens as an experimental pop artist. He came up off of his Latin trap sound, club bangers, songs that make you dance nonstop all night long. But similar to what Drake did for hip hop, he unabashedly brought the perspective of a man with a broken heart into that genre. Bad Bunny then took it further, cementing himself as a genre bender when he started infusing a rock sound into his music. He started making slower songs that were more for relaxing and soothing sounds. That alone was enough for him to become a household name, especially in the Latin community all across the world. Sold out shows, global festivals, viral music videos, you name it, he did it and still didn't become complacent. Something that I pay very close attention to when I decide whether or not I believe an artist has the potential to reach GOAT legacy status. And that was proven at the highest level with his most recent album that he released this year, Debí Tirar Más Fotos. When he dropped this, it felt less like a new album and more like a homecoming. What happens when a global superstar who has every resource you can imagine decides not to push even further into the pop sound? What happens when that star turns inward to Puerto Rico, his home, his memories, his history? That's the story we're looking at today. How Bad Bunny tapping into the Puerto Rican sound paved the way for him to perform at the Super Bowl, taking a deeper risk by telling the story of his people. Debí Tirar Más Fotos is a love letter to Puerto Rico, the landscapes, rhythms, heartbreak over what has been lost. Bad Bunny went from the party and love records primarily dominating his content to, on this album, talking about the colonial influences on the island, the US's influences, as well as the gentrification that he watched happen in real time. Much more tense and deep topics to wrestle with, but ones that resonated that much more closely to the hearts of the people of Puerto Rico. And as he told those stories, he fused his core reggaeton sound with more traditional ones, piena, salsa, bomba, dembow, and was still able to produce one of the biggest hits of the year in Nueva York, where he acknowledges the Puerto Rican influences in the city of New York. In the context of broader pop culture, it's extremely difficult for artists when they reach a certain size to still relate to people who haven't seen the riches and extravagant experiences that they have. But for Bad Bunny, at every single step of the journey, he's never lost that connection to his people, to the place that he's from, making one of his key differentiators being, similar to Cardi B, one of the most relatable artists in music today in the mainstream. Bad Bunny, from the start of his career, set out to prove that an artist could reach pop culture relevancy with a Latin sound making Latin music. To dive all the way into deep end and invite global audiences to see exactly what the experience of Puerto Rico is like, what it's like being a Boricua, he created something bigger than just music to enjoy. He created a musical experience. When you can do that, you're proving that you don't have to conform to the most popular sound. In the past decade or so, in the workspace, we've seen a shift of cultures previously forcing you to conform to whatever the standard is for a given company. But in more recent history, people have been invited to bring their full selves to work. Why did that change happen? Because the companies that dared to push further and allow people to bring their full selves to work found that more unique ideas would enter the diaspora. Instead of just keeping the lights on, you're more likely to stumble into a great game-changing idea by allowing people to bring their unique experiences into the work that they do. But there's always fear with that. Even if they tell you every single day, bring your full self to work, there will always be a hinge of fear that if you bring your full self to work, you may never fully be accepted. And we discussed that last week when we spoke about Taylor Swift's The Life of a Showgirl, because as she inches towards revealing more about her life beyond being just a hopeless romantic, now that she has found a relationship that she's content with, what we uncover is that not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone wants everything that you have to present, and that becomes a delicate balancing act. But when people who have massive influences like a Taylor Swift or a Bad Bunny decide to take that leap, it breaks down the barriers for everyone else. When the biggest pop star in the world is taking that risk and sharing their story with the world, if you have a similar story to them, it now becomes that much more palatable. Imagine the experience of people who may have not interacted with Puerto Ricans saying, I had the privilege of learning about that culture through Bad Bunny's music, and it even inspired me to learn more about it. You never know when that one decision of fearlessness that you choose to make can inspire everyone else around you. In this case, Bad Bunny went all in into becoming the ambassador for Puerto Rico on the global stage. As a representation of that culture, when we look at the Super Bowl that's supposed to highlight the biggest artists that American culture has to offer, I would have been shocked if we went many more years without Bad Bunny stepping into the fold. The selection committee evolved to welcoming hip-hop in recent history to reflect those stories of people who previously didn't get them broadcast on the biggest stage in that way. And if we already saw this play out with hip hop, it was only a matter of time before someone who so deeply represented the people of Puerto Rico would get elevated up to a stage where they could speak for them. In a society, the biggest pop culture figures are a reflection of the people, a reflection of what they like, what they experience in a given moment in time. You don't get to maintain that status unless other people want you to maintain it. In this case, millions of people wanting you to maintain it. So this coming February, Bad Bunny will put Puerto Rican culture on one of the biggest stages that it's ever seen at the Super Bowl halftime show. And I have no doubt that with the relentless work ethic that Bad Bunny has already displayed throughout his career so far, that we're in for a treat, possibly one of the greatest halftime shows of all time when we consider the impact and influence that a moment like this can have. This will not be just another artist performing on the show because they have a successful catalog. This will be a cultural moment. The question is, will everyone watching be open to seeing it unfold? And for you listening, I ask the question, is there a place that you hold in your heart that shaped who you are today? And is that experience reflected in some way in the art or work that you produce every single day? In the sports world, one of the best players in the NFL today made sure that his story and experience was reflected every single game last season. And he brought us into that world with his new documentary, Saquon. Yes, this is the story of Saquon Barkley, the running back who was the heart and soul of the Philadelphia Eagles team that went on to win the Super Bowl last season. Saquon Barkley had the greatest revenge season in NFL history. This documentary isn't just a bunch of highlights stitched together to show you how great he is as a player. It's the story of someone taking control of their narrative at the biggest turning point of their life. This documentary that was executive produced by Martin Scorsese, roughly 5 years of Saquon's life, documented through his own video diaries, telling you exactly what was on his mind during different experiences. From ACL surgery, contract disputes with the New York Giants, all the way to winning the Super Bowl, climbing the top of the football mountain. Oftentimes, athletes are boxed into the narratives that the media defines. They are exactly who the fans say they are. In a time where many public figures have to be media trained and filtered, we get a transparent look at Saquon's most vulnerable side. Resilience and reinvention was shown as we watch him recover from an ACL injury that seemingly could have forever changed his career, but he beat it and came back better. The juiciest part of the documentary was him facing challenges with loyalty, betrayal, and understanding his own value. He had one of the biggest public contract disputes in recent history. To many, Saquon proved that he was one of the best at his position every time he stepped on the field. Yet, at every turn behind the scenes, he was feeling used, underappreciated, and pushed to the edge by his own team, the New York Giants. For a running back, the position that he plays, a narrative started to permeate NFL spaces that said, once you reach the age of 26, most running backs are going to fall off a cliff physically and not return nearly the same investment that you put into them. So as Saquon approached that hypothetical mountain, his team refused to pay him the amount of money that he believed he was worth, that he believed his resume warranted. He was the face of the team, he had countless fans, and at what point do you make the decision of whether to be loyal to your team versus being loyal to the future that you believe you could and should have? For Saquon, as he detailed in the documentary, the one thing that broke his trust, that made him feel betrayed by the team that put so much love and energy into him, was a feeling of disrespect. When he initially went to his team and was trying to get more money on the table, he felt like they swept it under the rug. When he went to the team and said respectfully, can you trade me to another place, get some value back from me so I can find a partner who would actually pay me the amount that I want, they declined him. By the time they came back and upped their offer just a little bit more but still didn't meet what he requested, he felt like they didn't take his request seriously and frankly felt taken advantage of. Once respect leaves the room, what else do you have? That might be the number one indicator that it's time to take your talent somewhere else where it might be more appreciated. But it's still scary because when you're in a company, in his case, when you're on a team, you don't know if the outside world will accept and view the talents that you believe you have. You have a place that you're loyal to, that is providing for you, and is offering you to continue to do that. Change is risky because it's full of uncertainty. So only you can decide whether or not you're willing to take that risk. For Saquon, he had enough. And he showed it on the documentary. Tears, arguments. He went through the whole range of emotions before he decided, no dice. I am not taking the deal that the New York Giants offered me. And when he opened up for other teams to make offers, lo and behold, the Philadelphia Eagles saw exactly what his value would be, and they paid him what he wanted. And when he arrived in Philadelphia, every single game he looked like the best running back on planet Earth. He was in MVP conversations. He was on pace to break nearly every single significant running back record and decided not to because he felt like him resting his body would give them a better chance to win the Super Bowl. And it turns out he was right because he carried that momentum all the way up to the biggest stage and won a Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles. Not only did he disprove the myth that running backs will be done after a certain age, he also disproved a permeating myth that a great running back might not necessarily translate to winning a championship. He showed that a great running back can be the engine to a Super Bowl winning team. So in the end, Saquon got the last laugh as his ex-team, the New York Giants, during that same season, did a dance with mediocrity, watching the face of their team that they parted with reach the highest heights that he possibly could desire. This documentary is a reminder that athletes are cultural figures, not just performers. There were Giants fans who got their hearts ripped out as they saw their favorite player depart, and Philadelphia Eagles fans who got their hearts put back in watching him carry them to a championship. An athlete's decisions, narratives, and vulnerabilities influences how we perceive their ambition, sacrifice, and identity. Maybe their peak isn't just when they're on the field. Maybe it's when they're willing to face their fears, their doubts, and take control of their story. For Saquon, he catapulted himself into pop cultural relevancy. So when you see Saquon Barkley play, let him be a reminder to you of the question, will you choose to tell your own story or let the world around you script it for you? Think about a moment in your life when you resisted taking the story that was being pushed onto you and chose to elevate to something greater that you saw within yourself. In the gaming world, we might be witnessing a situation like that play itself out. Call of Duty's reign of dominance might be coming to an end. The new game, Battlefield 6, didn't just arrive. It made a statement. After the last iteration in this gaming franchise stumbled, it aimed to reclaim its space in the first-person shooter world through spectacle, community, and authenticity. The last Battlefield game, 2042, was highly criticized because it lost some of the feel that people who played the other Battlefield games remembered. What was always going to give it a leg up over Call of Duty was having a unique feel that people are attached to. So for Battlefield 6, they doubled down on that. Destructible environments, custom class systems, grounded combat. They want you to play the game and remember the experience through how it makes you feel, rather than attempting to chase trendy gimmicks. Always remember what made people fall in love with your game in the first place. Leading up to the launch, one of the best moves they made was opening up a beta for players to interact with the game and provide feedback to the developers before they finalized the product. And when people were already enjoying the beta, it was a good sign for what was to come. Most big budget video games can feel detached from their community. We are going to go into our silo and make the game that's going to make us a lot of money and give it to you and you're going to buy it. That's the typical experience. But when the game lets you in on the development, lets you feel like you're a part of making it great, that's when you get the most engaged possible community that you can have. And this extends to the work world as well. Have you ever had an experience where you've left feedback on an app or a product that you enjoy and they took it and thanked you for you providing that feedback? It makes you feel like you're a part of the team, like you have an investment in making it be the best possible product that it can be. They even made a choice to not overdo it on the technical complexities of the game so that everyone on every system can have a relatively smooth experience playing the game. One thing that stood out to me was the fact that they chose to create a portal editor game mode, a community-driven content tool where you can make your own maps and individual games to play. It reminds me of what made Halo Reach one of the greatest games in gaming history because they had the Forge, the ability for you to build your own maps to play publicly with people. If the right people invest time in making their own innovative maps, these are the type of additions that can extend the lifespan of a game way beyond the couple month marker when hype is at its highest. It lets gamers create their own mini universe within your game. That's the type of move that, for me, elevates your game because now you're tapping into people's storytelling and imagination. The same way it's important for the film industry to let movies that have more unique ideas see success, to promote creativity in your field, Battlefield 6 seeing success would move us further down that trail of ensuring that making sure you invest in the actual feel, experience, and community of a game is what should lead to your game being successful. In our lives, we all have moments where we get caught up in a trend or stuck in the same hamster wheel for a period of time, but sometimes it's important to step back from that and reconnect with what made you special in the first place. But Battlefield 6 hasn't been alone in this in the gaming world, because Sony has created the greatest samurai video game of all time, and it's dominating the gaming world right now. Ghost of Yotei isn't just a sequel that millions of people were hyped for. It's a bold redefinition of how a simple story about legacy, vengeance, and identity can be morphed into a beautiful, massive world that's built on the fabric of myths, legends, and history. This standalone sequel to similarly successful game, Ghost of Tsushima, takes place 300 years later, still in feudal Japan. You play as a character named Atsu, a mercenary who's haunted by the death of her family and is now seeking revenge on the people responsible. This character, Atsu, takes on the persona of an onryo, which stands for a vengeful ghost, becoming a almost supernatural figure on her quest to bringing these people to justice. The world these developers built is gorgeous as a contrast from a rather traumatic journey that you're embarking on. It shows the value in how the story is not just the writing, it's not just the character design, it's the world that you're building. You feel like you're this character going on a journey of self-discovery, and each time you have a random encounter with a character in the game, you feel like the ghost, the onryo. Video games entered pop culture relevancy when they evolved past just pressing a couple of buttons to have a good time. Gamers now expect more than just good combat. They expect combat, symbolism, and emotional stakes that you actually believe. So Ghost of Yotei leaned into cultural complexity, pulling from the deep roots of feudal Japan and immersing you in that world. Every swing of a blade, every arrow let go from a bow is animated in a way that makes you feel like you're actually experiencing what it would have been like to go through this journey in that time. You could tell this is a labor of love, as every technique feels like it accurately mimics the study of these different martial arts. And it takes the time to make you appreciate that. As to develop as a character in the game, you have to go and meet with different teachers. Storytelling can thrive when players are given breathing room, being able to choose exactly how you want to go about the journey, completing missions that you want, declining the ones that you don't, and not just being guided by trackers and markers. This will be one of the highest selling games of the year and likely be in contention for the game of the year when those awards come around. There are thousands of people who have put in 20 plus hours in the game without actually advancing the story at all, just completing side missions. So keep that in mind when you think about the fact that sometimes your words alone won't be enough to move the needle and influence other people. Sometimes you need to consider, how do you make them feel? And that at times can be even more important than what you say. There's one movie in particular that's showing that to the world en route to making history. And that's a movie that I've now come around to see, called Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle has officially become the biggest movie in anime history, grossing over $600 million with only a roughly $20 million budget to make the movie. But what makes it so special? Is it just another anime movie? No. This is a movie that is a continuation of the series Demon Slayer. In fact, they've made a movie before, but it was not nearly as impactful as this one. And that's because they took a chance on what I believe might be one of the most brilliant decisions ever made for a popular anime. Demon Slayer, being one of the biggest animes today, had an opportunity to end off the show the same way that most do, splitting up the ending into a couple of seasons that people highly anticipate and stay up to watch. Instead of that, They chose to take the end of this show and break it into 3 movies, a trilogy. So this isn't a typical movie. This is in fact more like 5 or 6 episodes of a show stitched together for you to watch in a movie theater. But because it was intentionally built as a movie, in the development of it, they cut out a lot of the fat that you might normally have found if this was broken into a regular TV series. So we get a nearly 3-hour anime movie that's killing it internationally. Now, if you have never seen the series before, I admit it might be difficult for you to pick up on what's going on because you get thrown straight into the beginning of the final battle. But if you're even roughly familiar and you can watch a quick recap video, you will feel comfortable enough to be thrown right in the fire because the movie still strategically takes the time to provide you context and make sure every character's name is said at some point, every character's motivations are mentioned at some point, and every character's abilities are shown in some way, shape, or form, but this time animated to the highest degree because the studio opened their wallets to show one of the most beautifully animated movies that I've ever seen in the anime genre. This has become an instant fan favorite and stapled its name in global pop culture history. Shattering box office numbers is one thing, but in terms of being culturally relevant, you need to be doing something truly special and memorable. When you're forced to narrow the story to fit the runtime of a movie, what we get is more focus on the battles carrying emotional weight, history, and consequences. And while in a show, you might watch 30 minutes and the battle might have only gotten 25% of the way through, you know while you're watching the movie that you're going to see something close to the conclusion of it. So you can allow yourself to be completely immersed into the story being told. I was getting goosebumps left and right at multiple different moments at the movie, and this was one of the most rowdy crowds that I've experienced as people were yelling every time something epic would take place. And this is nearly a month after the movie has been released. Now, one of the more polarizing decisions it made was to lean heavily into flashbacks. You get the origin stories for the villains in this movie, the exact trauma that turned the tide for their lives to take a completely different path. The inner worlds of a character is essential because it's very easy for you to just have your protagonists take on villains and the audience accepts these are bad people, so you have to do bad things to them. But when you can get the audience to sympathize with a villain, the emotional weight increases exponentially because you're feeling the pain of both sides, knowing someone has to lose. I cannot say enough about the direction, animation, cinematography of this beautiful film, as it invites even non-anime audiences into a deep emotional and mythic story. A good anime story now has to carry that weight as it breaks into pop cultural relevance. Just like Marvel went through this turning tide to where superheroes invited people who weren't necessarily superhero fans to be able to experience the grand moments, anime is starting to shift into that territory. And I look forward to seeing if other animes will follow along in this movie-structured season sequence. When done with care, a fantasy spectacle can reflect real internal human drama. The highlight of this film was the story of the villain Akaza, who also was a star of Demon Slayer's last film, as the movie takes you on a 30 to 40 minute journey down the path of his life and all the different turns that made him become one of the most powerful characters in the series. People will definitely remember the moment that this movie created as anime continues to gain more ground in pop culture and challenges the idea that all blockbusters need to either be a superhero movie or sci-fi. Demon Slayer is a deeply Japanese series with many cultural references, aesthetics, histories, and yet it's found success across many cultures across the world. If you decide to see this film, I'd love to hear what characters' arcs or backstories resonated the most with you, especially if you're an anime fan just learning about this world for the first time or having your first experience with it. But with that, we've come to the end of this week's podcast. Thank you again for listening. and taking the time to get up to date on the biggest stories across pop culture. The NBA season is approaching and there's a lot of big storylines that will be on the way as we see which teams got better and which teams got worse. You can find the link to my newsletter that just launched its first edition in the description to this podcast. So please sign up if you're at all interested in getting to keep up with all the pop culture moments that even I don't get to discuss on this podcast. Every moment that you could possibly find interesting will be nested in my newsletter that's also titled Behold Pop Culture. I look forward to speaking to you next week. This is Behold Pop Culture.